What's something your employer did that instantly killed employee morale? No raises or bonuses this year due to company performance, but I will make it up to you by taking the whole company to the lake for a trip on my new 30-foot boat. Story 2. In a very short span of time, they changed everyone's 401k plan for worse and then implemented an office-wide cleanliness policy. No eating at your desk. Only 3 personal items on your desk. Everything labeled. No items other than your keyboard, mouse, and monitors on your desk at the end of the day. Talk about pissed off. You could feel the gloom when you walked in. Everyone's give-a-crapter broke at once. Story 3. Large factory, not unionized. Each department clocks in at a different place, mainly that department's break room. My department clocked in across the facility from the main entrance, which meant it took about 15 minutes to walk from the front door to where you clocked in and out at, and another 5 to walk from that entrance to the parking lot. There was a side exit that we would use. However, that literally cut that walk down from 20 minutes to 3, since our department was right next to the parking lot. Management decided that all employees must enter and exit through the same door, which meant we had to walk all the way down to the main entrance and then back around to our cars. There was so much rebellion from the employees in our department that they had to bar the door shut with 2 iron 4s. Joke's on them. Even non-unionized employees can be a pain in the ass. We contacted the fire marshal, who upon seeing a fire exit barricaded, fined the company $8,000. We still were not allowed to enter through this door, but they stopped trying to stop us. Story 4. To cut costs, they started a policy that only certain departments had internet access. It basically started a class system that bred resentment across departments and caused an exodus from the non-internet teams. Story 5. My boss is looking to retire in the next 4 years. He told everyone that he wanted us to come up our visions for the company and its future over the next 5, 10, 20 years. We're a small office of about a half dozen people, but we've been growing, and so everyone brought up growth projections and succession planning once he retires, etc. His son is the heir apparent and has a precocious 8-year-old, so in my 20-year version, I even included the grandson joining the business and grooming it to become a legacy company. My boss went last, and we were expecting something acknowledging some of our thoughts, or at least an expression of appreciation that the company he founded would live on well past his retirement. Be in good hands, Instead, it was brutal and short. It was something along the lines of, I do everything around here anyway, so I should just sell the company to fund my retirement, and you can all find other companies to work for in a few years. Mood killed. Meeting ended. Story 6. In a company of 6 people, owner said in a meeting with everyone that his 2 sales guys are irreplaceable and that the rest of us are just paper pushers. Story 7. We were once in the middle of a very stressful period of work, and everyone was feeling it. However, one afternoon, an offhand comment turned into a conversation that we all got involved with and led to a few laughs. My manager, returning from a meeting, piped up, "Oh, we've finished tomorrow's work, have we? What's all this about?" Insert subject matter. Entire team instantly deflated. Unnecessary. Every employee needs time to blow off a little steam. Story 8. Former teacher. The administrators at my school were usually pretty chill, but had a habit of randomly coming up with minor rules that they would enforce for us. Male teachers had to wear ties even on jeans day, etc. Overall, it wasn't bad, except for the time an administrator made a crucial mistake. They banned staff from drinking coffee in front of students. Now, if you've never worked in a school, you'd think this isn't a big deal. When you spend nearly 100% of your day in front of students, it definitely is a big deal. First, we tried to find any loophole we could. Energy drinks? Banned the next week. Tea? Banned 2 days later. It was chaos. Eventually, we realized they couldn't fire an entire school's worth of teachers and aides, so we ended up doing the one thing that private schools fear most. We formed a union. Realistically, it was more of a weird pseudo-union focused specifically on civil disobedience regarding the coffee issue, but it ruffled feathers nonetheless. The administrators caved to our demands, allowed us to drink coffee again, and even bought each of us a reusable coffee mug as a gesture of goodwill. And that's the story of how a handful of school administrators almost accidentally created a teachers' union over a complete non-issue. Story 9. Removed COLA, raises each year for all employees, and implemented a raise when promoted or take on more responsibility model. However, promotions are very rare and raises are never approved. So everyone is losing money to inflation each year, and they tried to sell it as a big win for the employees. We aren't stupid people. Story 10. Casually said, the best employee was X, and everyone, including X, knew that X was among those who did the least amount of work. X was the most friendly to the boss, always coming in to say, "Hi, do you need anything?" Story 11. Held a super positive, pep rally style, company-wide meeting about how they were going to start combining our sick days with our vacation days and now just call them PTU. This was presented to us as a great thing, since we could all now use our PTO days fully as vacation days if we wanted to. Once the system was implemented, everyone realized that instead of getting 10 vacation days and 10 sick days per year, we now all had 15 PTU days. Everyone was pissed. Story 12, head of department realized that we weren't about to meet our targets for the financial year. Completely banned annual leave for 3 months. Forced anyone who didn't fill in their timesheet on time to attend disciplinary meeting, despite problems with the system, meaning that some didn't get filled in, and generally had lower management terrified, causing a massive blame culture, and several people to be signed off with mental health issues. In the end, the employee survey, which went to his bosses, was hilariously bad, and he's now somewhere else, making some other people's lives a misery. The best part was when his replacement came in and fired his right-hand man, who was also a junk. Story 13. It was a 1-2 punch. The company-wide meeting announced the promotion of several high-level management and executives, mostly title and responsibility changes. Lots of smiles and handshakes, not unlike a college graduation ceremony. After these promotion announcements, they declared that due to the stagnant economy and poor sales, the entire company would be experiencing a pay freeze as a result. So, no raises for anyone. They then concluded the meeting by discontinuing casual Fridays. So, no more jeans on Friday. It almost felt like it was designed to make people want to quit and leave. It worked though. I and many others moved on to greener pastures within the year. I moved on to what was the most lucrative job I've ever had as a result of this, so I don't hold any resentment. I just remember it utterly destroyed employee morale that day. If it was the ownership/management's plan to get people to quit, it was pretty stupid, as only the mobile and capable talent moved on, while those incapable of finding another job, or the lifers who would probably stay on even if the company announced they planned to cut the oxygen supply to the building by 50% to save money, stayed on through it. I can understand the need for promotion to fill positions from vacancies, etc. I can understand the need to have a pay freeze. It beats layoffs, right? But doing the prior two right after each other and then saying, yeah, and no more casual Fridays just seemed really vindictive and malicious. If anything, they should have softened the blow of the pay freeze by saying casual Friday is now every day, and people would have left the meeting at least neutral, if not slightly hopeful. Story 14. Told a bunch of people they were going to be promoted to get us to do extra work. No one got promoted. I basically did her job for a month. Me and 3 of my coworkers quit, and she got fired a few months later. Story 15. Had a boss everyone loved. Then she got transferred to another store, and the new guy that replaced her decided the schedule that we'd all gotten used to needed to be shaken up. He posted the next week's schedule that was completely different than it had been under the previous manager. Got a bunch of complaints from people saying they can't work X days or Y times, and it seemed he was receptive since he took that schedule down. Then suddenly, bam, he just reposted the same exact schedule and said, "Duck everyone." Oh, we had some people calling in sick from time to time under the old manager, but this new manager has pretty much half his crew every single day calling out because of his crafty tactics. Here's the first thing to learn about being a good manager. You don't need to shake things up for people to be better workers. You don't need to put your mark on anything if it's working just fine the way it was. Story 16. Changed up the metrics that determined people's bonuses, and it included things that were important for the business to know, but completely beyond the control of those the people whose bonuses were impacted. For example, we had a right party contact rate. How many times you actually got the person you were calling versus the number of calls you actually made. The problem was the phone number list came from elsewhere, and the people making the calls were just given a list of numbers, and you had to call them all. No leeway. So you're calling blind from a list you don't control, and get penalized if the list is crap. Oddly enough, the people in charge of making the phone number lists, their bonuses were not influenced by right party contact rate. Story 17. Put up a poster that said, "Complaining is like vomiting. You feel better, but everyone around you feels sick." The morale was already bad, but it was just a crafty way to take a hit at upset employees rather than do anything positive. Story 18. Was working for EB Games when GameStop bought them. 20% of any warranty and $1 for every subscription sold went into your paycheck as commission. And you'd never feel dirty selling the things because Edge Magazine, EB's answer to Game Informer, and their extended warranties were legit and fairly priced. GameStop buys the company. First thing they do, nix the commissions. You still have to sell the stuff, of course. I'll never forget the first meeting I had with GameStop as a manager. They really drilled how profitable those things are to the company. Soon after came the threats of reduced hours if you didn't hit quotas mandated by corporate. Yeah, duck GameStop. Story 19. Started firing people by lining 2 up at a time and seeing which one they prefer to keep on. Didn't matter if you were there for 20 years or 2. Also hiring management from outside and not promoting within, which means the new managers have no knowledge of anything that company does in terms of ethics, procedures, or employee status. It has turned this clique-type environment into every person for themselves. Very toxic. Story 20. They got rid of their night cleaning crew the week after I started, and we had to learn how to clean the whole department on our own before close. I work in a meat department, so this meant taking apart and cleaning 2 meat grinders and a bandsaw that were covered with meat goop. Almost the whole department quit because of this, but I stuck around and got the hang of it. After about 3 months, though, they hired the cleaning crew back. Now closing is a breeze. Story 21. Me personally, I'm a security guard at a library. My boss said she wanted me moving around a lot, which is cool. I would get up every 15 minutes, patrol the entire building, then sit back down for another 15 minutes. It's not the busiest place, so it seems to work out fine, especially since my coworkers always know how to get a hold of me. However, apparently a coworker told my supervisor I was slacking off, and this coworker's known for micromanaging people she has no control over, and wasn't doing my job properly. But instead of talking to me about it, my boss just says, "Oh, I meant constantly walking. 4 to 8 hours straight, no sitting down at all. Also, we fired the only other security guard, so you gotta take his shifts too." So other than a legally obliged 15-minute break, I'm supposed to be hiking all day long and assert my presence to the dozen or so patrons we have. I'm turning in my 2-week notice on Wednesday, and in the meantime, I just take very long bathroom breaks. Story 22. I once had a retail manager who sent out a memo that we worked so hard and did such a great job this month that she gets a bonus. That went over like a lead balloon. Story 23. At an airplane factory, managers started rationing gloves, hairnets, masks, and trash bags. At the same time, we had to go on a 12x6 work week. Like, that was going to make up for the increase in labor. Story 24. I worked at a club in Miami, and the owner was out of his ducking mind, years of substances abuse. When the housing market crashed, obviously people were spending far less going out, but he insisted we were all stealing. We had meetings once a week with all kinds of threats. Finally, he put in an automatic pouring system for $50K plus. It basically looks like you're pouring drinks from a soda gun. Super boring. The fun vibe and flair we had was totally gone, which made sales drop even more. He ripped the system out 2 weeks later. Story 25. Boss pitched a sales incentive trip to Cancun if the team hit the goal. My team exceeded the goal, and then they canceled the trip. 2 people quit. I accepted a position with their main competitor, and less than a year later, they closed in bankruptcy. Karma's a beach. Story 26. Old folks' home kitchen, maybe 20 staff members. Boss declared we were too happy and made a new set of rules. Dej there was to be absolutely no talking, laughing, or jokes. The kitchen was to be silent because we were distracting ourselves from work. Digging anyone working less. The 9 or 10-hour shifts were forbidden bathroom breaks. Going to the bathroom on a shift with less than 9 or 10 hours was a fireable offense. Permitted bathroom breaks could not be on the clock. Your lunch must be used to use the bathroom. Lunch breaks were 15 minutes long. Any communication with management was seen as inappropriate. Staff and management were to be kept separate at all times. A manager ducked a staff member, and it made a big deal. That's why this was made. You will not be paid overtime, but will be expected to work. If you are to clock out by 8 p.m. but are still needed, you must clock out then return to work. Complaints to HR or labor board are fireable offenses. Yes, people complained. Yes, the place was investigated. Ex-boss was sued, lost, morale dropped. They have a hard time keeping employees now, and from what I heard, most of the new employees are high school students. Ex-boss announced a sudden retirement for the end of the year, and the kitchen will be taken over by all new people. I jumped ship early on. Do not miss the place. Story 27. I work in a big corporate building. The same older lady came by everyone's desk towards the end of the day to collect the trash. Just the sweetest lady ever, and every time she'd walk to my desk, she'd give me a big smile and ask me how my day was and chat for a minute as she got my trash. Usually I'd dump it in for her. I had some rough days, but she has a way to cheer me up and send me home on a higher note. I know I'm not the only one either. So then a few weeks back, our work implemented a new policy to cut down on trash usage. It's no longer allowed to have a trash bin at our desk, and we have to walk across the room and use the community trash to throw anything away. Not a huge deal, but the real reason they did it is so they can cut down on cost, i.e. the cleaning crew. Sad to say that I haven't seen Sharon since. Story 28. Regarding how employees will travel between Site A and Site B. What if something happens to their kids? They will need a way back here, and sharing one vehicle between 8 people makes that difficult. They won't want to come back. They'll stay and work. No. Parents will 100% not care at all about what's happening at work when somebody calls and said there's something wrong with their kid. We don't need to invest in group transport. Then we bought a company van that employees don't like. Story 29, I have 2. Company 1 canceled the Christmas party and Christmas bonuses for the whole company because we didn't have the money for it. I found out later the CEO and the CTO used company funds to take a week-long ski vacation in Whistler instead of doing something nice for the employees. You better believe I spread that evidence erugine the office. Company 2. It's not one specific incident, but my current company in the last couple years switched from guaranteed permanent employment for anyone who worked there long enough to a system of permanent contract labor for a huge section of their workforce. Rumblings of unionization have started amongst the contract workers. Story 30, I worked at a restaurant with a crap tip minimum, $2.63 an hour. We'd be penalized for being even 5 minutes late, so lots of us showed up 20-30 minutes early to make sure we'd avoid the penalty. This is Boston, so that was an appropriate gamble. I've gotten stuck on the T for 10-20 minutes on numerous occasions, and we'd just get right to work. And there's plenty to do in opening a big restaurant, so we'd clock in and start working. No one was clocking in and failing to work. In fact, I liked getting there early because the kitchen would get up to 113. Most of the morning prep occurred in the kitchen and was fairly rigorous. We didn't really air condition and had to wear long-sleeve shirts and pants, so I could knock everything out in a tank and shorts, change into my uniform, and not start my shift a sweaty mess. The manager gave us a big lecture about how it adds up, even if it is only $2.63 an hour. She made a new rule that we couldn't clock in more than 10 minutes before our shift began, even if we were working. By the way, that's a 15-minute window of appropriate clocking in time in Boston, with a notoriously unreliably public transportation system, crazy weather, and overclogged roads. Duck Grafton Street and duck you, Ashley. Story 31. I told the hiring manager that I was disappointed in one of his hires because he knew literally nothing about our job, and asked him, "Doesn't that cheapen my knowledge and expertise?" His response, "Well, let's be honest, your job doesn't really need all that, does it?" There were 4 other people my level, with varying fields of expertise at that meeting, and it got real quiet after that. Story 32. I worked at a dog daycare center as the assistant manager for a few months. We just started a training class, so you would tell us what commands you would like us to teach your dog, and we would pull them aside for 1 hour and teach that command with a certified trainer. The service usually costs an extra $45 on top of your daycare visit. Well, our trainer quit unexpectedly, and the owner asked myself and the other manager to step in as the trainers. We informed him that we did not have the proper certifications, and our program promised the customers a certified trainer. He then told us to bring them in for an hour and have the dog hang out with us in the office, and he would tell the parents what they worked on for the day. Needless to say, we refused to do so, and we were blamed for being non-loyal, good-for-nothing millennial. Well, he received 6 two-week notices within 1 week after I revealed this conversation with the employees. This place only had 10 employees in total. Story 33. Small business, 20 employees plus. Boss made a big speech about austerity measures and no raises this year. A week and a half later, he drives up in a brand new Silverado with all the bells and whistles. Expense to the business, of course. He would hate to have to pay taxes on those profits. One of the less subtle members of the staff took a literal crap in front of his office door. Story 34. Worked at a trading shop where up to 80% of yearly comp was in the form of an end-of-year bonus. One year, they decided that before the bonus was paid out, every employee had to sign a draconian non-compete agreement banning employment for 12 months at any competing firm. Oh, and you had to sign blind. Some folks signed and then were told they didn't get a bonus. I signed the non-compete, took my bonus such as it was, and walked out the door with both middle fingers pointing straight at the ceiling. During my 1 year on the sidelines, I built my own kick-ass trading capability that was light years ahead of what I left behind. That was definitely the oomph my career needed. Thanks, you miserable a-holes. Story 35. I used to work at an English immersion middle school in Korea. The admin was all Korean, including my boss, the vice principal. Word started going around that the school was under investigation for certain admin taking bribes to admit students. The VP got visibly anxious for a few weeks. Then one Sunday night, we got a text message from one of the Korean teachers at the school. The vice principal has passed away. It turns out he had hung himself in the school lobby that afternoon. The teaching staff still had to be at school the next morning, even though classes were canceled for several days. I remember walking into the school and seeing a custodian mopping the spot where the VP had been hanging. Morale tanked pretty hard for a while. Story 36. Had a big fight with his wife in front of everybody. I don't think you should run a restaurant with your family members unless you're really solid with each other. Story 37. I worked at a family-owned market that was well-known and loved by locals. The owners were a lovely couple that took care of their employees and would bend over backwards for their customers. They were very active in the community and highly respected. They had a few core employees and would hire on temp staff during the summer and holidays. The temps were mostly high schoolers and college kids that were home on break. They would bring back the same people as long as they could, and the kids would try to stay as long as they could. The pay was well above market for those positions. We could shop there and get a 75% discount. After 6 months, you got 2 weeks paid vacation. And the owners would close the store a couple days a year and host a party for all of the employees. It was the best job any high schooler in the area could get. I lived right next to the store, and my parents were friends with the owners, so I was given a job there. All my friends were jealous. After working there for a few years, the couple decided they wanted to retire to spend time with their daughter and her children in another state. Many tears were shed, and they had a huge retirement party where they introduced their son to everyone and told us he was taking over. They gushed about his prestigious business education and background. As soon as they were gone, the son decided he was going to remake the store in his image. He fired basically all the staff, most of whom that had been there for 10 to 15 plus years. He then staffed the whole place with homeschool kids and junkies. He cut the discounts and vacations. He hired some old high school friends to manage the place so he could take the profits to go party and get coked out. The shop went from having the same staff for years to having to retrain an entirely new staff every other month. No one wanted to stay. Managers were reporting perfectly good product as damaged and taking it home. Shelves sat empty. Locals stopped shopping there. The place became a corpse of what it had been. The original owners had enough of their friends complain to them about their son that they came back for a short time and tried to make it right, but it was too late. Their original staff had all moved on, and vendors had stopped doing business with the store. They decided to close the store, sell the property, and move away permanently. Last I heard, the son was in trouble with the IRS, and his wife divorced him when she found him ducking an escort. Story 38. At a company-wide meeting, 45 people called the employees an expense. Did not go over well at all. 2 people actually stood up and threatened to quit on the spot if the boss didn't reevaluate his statement and could explain what was wrong with it. This might be a translation error on my part. The meeting was in Swedish, and he made it pretty clear by tone of voice and overall feel that he only thought of the employees as an expense and not a resource. That yes, costs money, but also is the reason the company actually earns money as well. And if he could, he would do it all by himself to save on the expenses of having employees. We are talking about engineers with years, some cases decades of experience, and he thought he could replace them if only he had the time. That's what the careening was about. Story 39. Telling employees that they are going to fire you if you don't make more sales. Then, when someone quits, tell them, no, that was just motivation. We were never going to fire you. Story 40. I'm not sure if this counts. I was interning on the Hill for a congressman that will go unnamed. As an intern, your job is generally crap. Our only high point in the day were that we could choose what meetings we wanted to go to. The good ones had lots of food. We had an hour for lunch, and all the interns could go to lunch together. The congressman decided that was not how he wanted his office to be run. We were assigned the worst meeting to go to on the Hill. We only get 30 minutes for lunch, and we had to go to lunch one at a time. We ended up fight over who got to go to lunch between Van and Tushon every day. Some unlucky person would have to go to lunch at 4 a.m. Story 41. New store manager took a store that was already operating at profit with happy employees and completely redid a bunch of policies, where before we were all encouraged to help in any department. If we were knowledgeable and had time, people started getting written up for wandering too far from their own departments. Getting in trouble for taking overtime to finish assigned task lists in full before leaving, or getting in trouble for leaving on time without finishing the list. Being encouraged by one manager to take overtime and they'd approve it, then getting in trouble later because said manager never approved the overtime in our systems. Departments that once worked together on similar tasks now barred from helping each other unless directly instructed by management. A deliveries department that wouldn't fully pick their orders for customers, then blamed the other departments for not having it available, or generally leaving huge messes in those departments, never cleaning up after themselves, and the other departments getting in trouble for it. The list goes on. It took about a year to just completely drain that store's morale. Nobody there cares anymore besides the fresh faces, new hires, because they don't know what it was like before. Story 42. I was a hard worker, like an extremely hard worker. One day a supervisor asked why I wasn't working at my usual pace. So I told him I was facing homelessness if I couldn't find somewhere to live. He said, hey, well, I really need my superstar out here. I depend on you getting a lot done for me. He couldn't care any less about my problem. I was an employee who made him look good because I got results and not a human being. I never worked hard again and personally undermined the work ethic of everyone I came in contact with. I didn't have to learn that particular lesson a second time. Story 43. I work part-time at a university library while I attend school. I sit at the checkout desk/information desk. My boss, after one of us not saying goodbye to her one night, decided that us college students don't know how to sit at a desk and answer basic library questions. So now she sits down there every other hour and criticizes our every move. When it's the middle of summer and only 7 people are in the library, crap like this makes me want to quit my ducking job. We can't even read a ducking book at the desk at the library. It made me realize that she takes this crap way too seriously, and that has made me care even less. Story 44. Do I have to pick one thing? We got a new warehouse manager. For a while, it was every day that there'd be some new change that killed morale. People dread coming to work now, because who knows what it will be today. Here's a list of grievances in no particular order. He thinks we're Amazon. He came from Amazon and wants to make us Amazon. Amazon is the worst place in the world to work. He doesn't seem to understand that we make things, not just ship things. Track all the things, manually, because duck you. He wants to know how many units we're producing, by the hour, whether it counts as direct or indirect labor. He wants managers to plan for the day, a task which, given the nature of our business, may as well be planning on the weather. That means that I had to report my numbers twice, once at the end of the day for my actual machine logs, once so my manager too could make her plan, with a ton of micromanaging in the middle about which orders I have or have not fulfilled. We could have proper warehouse tracking and automation software, but duck it. Synced Excel spreadsheets and people handwriting crap on paper. More middle management. We had too much already, but now we have a ton of new useless people trying to justify their jobs by making us do busy work for them. Training videos that don't apply to us. Emailing people to do the jobs we were already doing, and endless meetings. You can never find our actual middle management, the people you need to get tasks done, because they're always in meetings, or taking the day off because no one wants to work here anymore. Tracking labor and productivity, we started having to juggle staff around, for no particular reason, to make the numbers work on paper. They permanently took away 2 of my staff, the 2 I was training to be able to do my job. Somehow they're still expected to fill my extremely technical position when I'm not there, without me being able to teach them anything. Cool, right? The rest of the time, they're floating around other departments, doing a task just long enough for someone to train them on it before floating somewhere else. Moved my department across the warehouse. My physical location can't move. It would cost a whole lot to move my machines. But now everyone I work with is on the other end of the warehouse for no particular reason. Lots of changes to attendance policies. One of them lasted exactly a day. You get 20 paid personal hours per year on top of regular PTO, and if you're late, you have to use them in 1-hour blocks. So if you're 6 minutes late, go get a coffee or something. When you run out of personal time, you're fired. Half the staff was still working for a temp agency and didn't get paid personal time at all, meaning they'd be fired if they were late once. Thankfully, everyone raised this issue to their managers, and we got it retracted the next day. A general attitude of blame the employees. For instance, one of those middle management positions we have is a safety and facility inspector, but he's not ever here. So instead, we have a committee of know-nothing people with other actual jobs who go around and write up reports and complain at you to fix things that aren't really your responsibility to fix. I've started kicking things back to middle management maintenance person whenever they complain. Oh, we're waiting on the maintenance guy. Get with him. He's not here now? Not my problem then. All problem, no fix. Like the above, we'll get directives about things not in our power to fix. For instance, all cartwheels must lock. Great, not a single cart in the building has locking wheels. Are you replacing them? Or are you just going to yell at me that my cart wheels don't lock? Do you expect me to go out to Home Depot and buy locking wheels and/or carts with locking wheels? Have you allocated a budget for this? Are you giving me the company card? No. We already had morning meetings, but they instituted a chant requirement then. The new rumor is that we're going to be required to say the Pledge of Allegiance now. The snowballing effect of old-timers quitting and being fired. All of the old leadership is disappearing, and people are being asked to jobs above their pay grade, and nobody in charge knows anything anymore, which leads to more people quitting. The rumor is my warehouse is closing in less than a year. There's a bunch of petty crap I didn't even mention here. I think they're trying to drive as many people out as they can, so they don't have to pay unemployment. Suffice to say, I've been applying for jobs and going on interviews. One of the last ones I went on, they said they already had a half dozen applicants for my warehouse and thought we were going under. Story 45. For years, I worked in a high-stress, high-turnover, low-paying job doing caregiving for adults with developmental disabilities. These issues are typical in this field, and my company, like many, exploited salaried employees by expecting them to work 50, 60 hours regularly and often more. I went months at a time working 70, 80, 90-hour weeks. I stayed through a lot of bullcrap because I love the folks I served. Last year, corporate required all managers to attend a mandatory training about caregiver fatigue. It made it worse for me to have language to describe the fatigue and burnout I'd been experiencing for years. Within the meeting, corporate acknowledged that they didn't pay us enough, and that many employees we supervised were literally homeless, food insecure, or on the verge of it. But increased pay is not on the table right now, so let's talk about other things we can do. They crowdsourced this exhausted group of salaried workers who suggested things like starting a company food pantry, a company clothing drive, and compiling lists of shelters in the area. That meeting was so blood-boilingly infuriating to sit through that I made the decision that day it was time to finally get out. I worked my last day for that employer this summer. I'm still looking for a full-time job, and I'm trying to hold out for a company that values my work enough to pay me fairly. In an ideal world, this new company doesn't add insult to injury by mandating training about how to recognize telltale signs of being ready to snap. Hopefully, when I've had some time to recover, I'll be able to come up with some lasting ways to change things in the caregiving industry. These systemic problems will only compound themselves as the baby boomers continue to age. Story 46. Not me, but someone on my direct family works for Build-A-Bear as a chief workshop manager. The Pay Your Age event was horrendous for their team morale and made several of them want to quit. Beyond just the main PAYA event, the next day the company sent out coupons for $15 off to everyone, not just the people who showed up and didn't get a bear, as a half-assed way of saying, sorry we couldn't meet demand. It was a bullcrap marketing ploy, and they knew full well what it would cause. So, while being out of stock and utterly exhausted, the entire following week, they had massive amounts of traffic and angry customers demanding to use the same printed coupons 4 times in a transaction. It's supposed to be one per customer, but there's nothing preventing someone from printing multiple copies and using it over and over in different transactions. Then their customer care team over the phone tells customers one thing, while corporate tells the employees at the stores to do something else. And the store employees end up dealing with angry customers who were lied to. I've lost all respect for Build-A-Bear. Story 47. Fired the 3 most likable, productive people in the department to bring in their own people under the guise of downsizing and restructuring. That entire department quit within a month. Story 48. We had a great season. He made a lot of money. He made enough money to pay all the bills and salaries for the year and about $150,000 extra. A few months later, he says, we aren't doing well and needs to cut everyone's pay. We are all subcontracted, so he thought he could get away with it. It lasted 1 week as we told him if he did it again, we were gone. Story 49. Plumbing shop. Newer owners came in. They were a married couple who had worked there for years and bought out the original owner. A few months later, as we are heading into Christmas, they called each employee in one at a time to explain how they, the employee, weren't getting a holiday bonus because the employee had messed something up earlier in the year. My reason was that I had broke a mirror in a customer's bathroom and it had cost $200 to replace, and they just couldn't afford to pay any bonuses. I brought in over $500,000 worth of business that year. Next week, they drove up in a new sports car. Someone asked what it was, and another plumber said it was a 2007 Christmas bonus. They've had a huge turnover in employees now. No one from when I worked there in 94 or 08 is still there. Story 50. Had a worker that worked herself silly for the job. Really loved the venue, loved the clients, loved the work, so she would work after clocking off, take work home, go in on weekends. Really just go above and beyond always. We always got incredible feedback from clients and suppliers about her. In our contract, it says we're entitled to a $5,000 raise after being employed for 3 years. At our yearly renewal, having been there for 3.5 years, she may ask for the raise. She was flat out told there was no room in the budget. She could have taken them to Fair Work Commission, but instead she just started looking for jobs. She left, got a great position in a great company, and is loving it. The guy they hired to replace her had a quarter of the experience, no love for the job, and his annual salary was $10,000 higher. Most of us have since left and the place is falling to crap. Story 51 would say things like, I don't care, get it done, or just do it like how the client asked. When telling him why certain things wouldn't work out, then the client would come back pissed because it didn't work out. Once got one of my bosses, ex-BF, to admit, I knew it wasn't going to work, but I didn't want to admit I was wrong. Sorry. Geek Squad is a great environment. Then again, YMAMV, as the job was great before we got new leaders who didn't know how to act or run the dept. Story 52. The head honcho established a new, if you have cell phones out, you get fired policy at a minimum wage campus bookstore. I, along with 15 employees and 5 managers, have quit in the past 2 months. Story 53. Electrical contractor of 35, 27 of which are out in the field. We earn PTO hours based upon the number of hours worked in a given week. Full-time employees earn what is equal to about 6 extra paid days off in a year, which is typically used for errands, sick days, taking care of children, and so on. One of the field employees is a known, to all other field techs, alcoholic. Word makes it to office personnel that this individual was using his PTO because he had tipped too many back the night before and couldn't make it to work on time. Owner denied his PTO claim, and he drove into the office to have a shouting match with the owner. Very next day, a company-wide email is sent stating that PTO will be indefinitely suspended because it is being abused. Not even sure if what they did is legal. But instead of dealing with this one employee, they decided to use it as a way to save paying out around 180 earned days off throughout the entire company. This happened about a week ago. Morale dropped instantly. Most field techs started showing up late, playing around on their phones, and leaving early. A couple guys have already jumped ship, and sounds like a large number of others are about to follow. I'm going to wait it out a couple months as I'm owed a Yeti cooler and vacation time on my anniversary. Story 54. Busting my ass off at a company where I was effectively on call 24 hours a day for 3 years, leading development of core products. My boss constantly told me I was wrong about things, only to come back 2 months later to tell people to do what I told them to 2 months before, but now claiming it was his idea, blaming me for every mistake in the product, including those that were his ideas, and refusing to let me get around to doing those things I was actually hired to do, because there was a chronic backlog of things to do, because he refused to hire enough hands to get them done. Those were bad enough, but the time he flat out told me that he didn't give a crap about my career progression or anyone else's on my teams, when he canceled our participation in conferences so that we could slave away on a project we'd already come close to completing. Yeah, that was bad. We lost 3 people on a team of 4 on the core product. About half the staff has turned over, and yet the company insists that nothing is wrong and that the guy is a great leader. Yep, going to be a reference for another guy who's leaving tomorrow. Story 55. One made it so that only restockers could go to the storage area and bring out items that needed to be restocked. This pretty much created chaos because there was usually only 1 restocker per shift, and when things got really busy, everything slowed down and made things worse for everyone. 2. Not allowing cashiers to leave the registers, even if it wasn't busy. 3. Cutting hours from employees that had been there for years. 4. When some of the staff learned that they were glorified temporary workers and that they'd eventually be forced to leave, they tried to make us feel better by telling us to reapply after 6 months, and maybe we'd be hired back. Story 56. Just started a new job that I love. Only problem is they're converting all of the office to open plan. Our area is up next for conversion. Everyone I've talked to is against it, and everyone I know that's currently working in it says it's terrible. The only people who don't have to sit in the open plan space are the people who champion it the most. Go figure. I can already see my productivity and morale tanking when I'm forced to hear every noise emitted by roughly 200 people in my section of the building. Open plan offices are the absolute dumbest idea ever conceived. Story 57. They replaced the Pepsi and Coke and coffee machines with ducking water and Sob Life water machines. There was literally a riot in the break room. You do not deny overnight workers their caffeine. Story 58. Our bosses, after luring a lot of our employees with a generous holiday schedule, forced everyone to come into work on the 4th of July and the 5th, which we also had scheduled off. That one was rough. Story 59. Canceled overtime. I used to work as a helicopter mechanic for a company primarily in the oil patch. We'd do a 28 on, 14 off rotation in the middle of nowhere, getting up before dawn to prep the helicopter to be flying as soon as the sun came up, fly as needed all day until sundown, and then tie down the machine. Typically, the day was pretty easy in between, maybe 3 or 4 hours of flying, so you'd refuel a couple times and take care of incidental crap like making sure you had enough fuel or maybe going back to camp to grab hot lunches for yourself and the pilot. Overtime was paid out as straight time, and the extra 0.5 was banked as paid vacation. It wasn't unusual to work double a standard week for the duration, and it was the only thing that really made the travel and long shift rotation worthwhile. Anyway, after I'd been with the company a few months, they announced that they weren't paying overtime anymore, except for rare special instances like staying up all night to do a 100-hour inspection. We were expected to basically work a split shift early morning and late evening and spend the days just sitting in camp doing nothing. I guess a lot of people were pretty pissed, but I didn't stick around for the fallout. Gave my 2-week notice, which coincided with my 2 weeks of earned vacation, and said goodbye. Story 60. Company owner left on a 2-week vacation to Chile without telling anyone. It was a small marketing firm with about 7 employees. I texted him on Monday morning around 11:30 a.m. asking where he was. He stayed out late drinking pretty frequently and often didn't roll in until 11 a.m. He informed me he was on vacation and put me in charge for the next 2 weeks, probably because I was lucky enough to be the first person to text him. He missed 2 client meetings and 1 campaign pitch, all of which went okay and we managed without him. I even signed on a new account and had all the paperwork completed and was working on brand new campaign ideas to show him when he returned. He only called twice to check in. Showed up 2 weeks later and declared that the company was bankrupt and we were all out of jobs. So yeah, that was an instant morale killer. Story 61. Mandatory overtime, 7 days a week, or days, stated that we were purposely not hitting his physically impossible goals just to suck up overtime even though no one wanted it. This went on for months. He'd also fire people dozens at a time. The checks were nice, but I had to get out of there. And for the only time in my life, I quit a job without another one lined up. When I worked there, they preferred you to have some sort of technical background. Last I heard, they burnt through so many people they were hiring anyone. Also, for some reason, he wanted to take our chairs from us. He thought sitting equals not working hard. We worked on an assembly line. While often I would have to walk around, there would be long stretches of times where sitting made sense. But okay, whatever. He extended this philosophy to the engineers who had desk jobs, though. Story 62, City Charter School. Lots of community members in aide positions, and they kept the school together. About 20 teachers and staff were purged on a Black Friday about a month out from the school year. They were not given letters to return the next year, and the place went ballistic, replacing almost half the staff when really, my principal didn't bother leaving his office and assessing the situations in the classrooms. Instead, he just fired teachers. I left after I was given an offer, and he claimed I should be more loyal to those who gave you an opportunity. Bro, my 4 years of college and teaching license gave me the opportunity to get out of here. Story 63, this was almost 20 years ago. I was the sole IT guy for a small privately owned research company. Specialty was nanoscale doodads for government agencies, NASA, aerospace, that kind of stuff. Had about 80 employees at the time this happened. We were given performance goals for the company as a whole, rather than individual goals, that if met would get us all a nice bonus. Goals were met. The week we were supposed to get the bonus, we had an all-hands meeting where the CEO and CFO explained that our bonuses could not be paid right now, but would be paid eventually. Pinky swear, that was a dent to morale for the company, but not devastating. Layoffs started a couple weeks after that and continued in small batches every couple weeks. Rather than doing what needed to be done up front, they just kept laying off a handful of people here and there. It really destroyed everyone's morale, wondering who was going this week, who was going next week. Of course, after a few of these, everyone saw the writing on the wall, and there wasn't any good morale left to speak of. By the time I found another job a few months later, we were down to 30-some people. Never did get those bonuses. Worked out for me, though. Went from 32K to 45K at the new job. And I got to metaphorically laugh in my boss's face when he offered to match that salary after he had turned down a 5K raise I asked for a couple months prior. Story 64. Told us we were all replaceable. A staff of 20 poorly paid but very caring healthcare assistants in a private nursing home. Private sector means crap wage in UK, as not government mandated, unlike NHS or county council. He was a drunken git, and I only stayed because his wife was the best nursing home owner I had ever worked for. Just had a blind spot with her drunk sod of a husband. Anyway, some of the older women, ones with husbands who had salaries rather than wages, stood up and left. Someone rang his wife and she came in. We didn't see him for 2 weeks, and when we did see him, she had busted him down to care assistant. I was his line manager, and made him apologize to all of us. That's why the older ladies came back and nobody actually left. He killed morale, but his wife, the brains, gave it the kiss of life. Story 65. CEO announced during a company-wide meeting that everyone would be getting raises and laid out exactly what money people would be on based on their job roles, even showing the structure on a PowerPoint that didn't actually go through with any of it. Story 66. So just had this happen. Working in a call center, she was employee of the month, had some of their highest metrics, etc. She noticed she started getting back-to-back calls while everyone else was getting 15+ minutes of availability. Contacted her boss's boss, and was continually being reassured that the issue was getting looked into. Her being stressed and overworked went on for 3 months. Eventually, she messaged the regional manager, and it was fixed the very next day. My acting theory is that one of her managers placed her into a priority queue to make their own stats look better. But everything worked out, right? Nope. She got an email today stating that she wouldn't be getting her bonus because she was using ACW too much. It's a temporary state you can place yourself in which postpones you being placed into the call queue in order to finish up your work from the previous call. She literally had no choice because she got seconds between calls. Funny thing, she saved documentation of everything, threw her managers under the bus, quit, and got another job all in the same day. Story 67. Social Security, there was hiring for Job A. Job A is entry-level but requires about 5 to 10 years of experience before moving into Job B. And honestly, most people in Job A don't ever get out of it because it's a career position despite being entry-level. Job B doesn't have anything to do with Job A, but the experience requirement has always been followed. So they test and interview for Job A and offer positions to those who were best qualified. Well, this is at the end of the fiscal year, and it turned out that they had enough money to hire people for Job B. However, they didn't have enough time to do a job posting and new interviews, so they called up all of the rejected applicants from the job, hiring them and handed them these higher positions. There were people who had worked their entire adult lives, trying to get job B, and then they hired people off the street. Rejected people, mind you. People were beyond pissed. Story 68. Hired a dude straight out of college and gave him more money than 90% of the people keeping the plant running. The guy can barely tie his shoes and has been moved between 6 departments over the course of a year because he can't do anything worth a crap, but he's bros with the higher up, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't help morale when you tell people there's no budget for a promised raise and then hire a dip crap. Story 69. It seems like a small thing, the company I worked for. I was one of 3 salespeople. The operations manager, who was my line manager too, insisted that when I was in the office, with just him and 4 others who were dressed casual, had to wear a tie. Said it to me in front of the others. He didn't wear a tie. We were in an industry where relationships with customers made business suits and ties were not normal. So duck him. I wore in the most horrific ties I could find. Christmas ones in summer, ones colorblind people wouldn't be seen dead in. Shiny ones, with fish on. He challenged me on it, and I asked him to put it in writing, explaining the reason for it and to show me where it was on my contract. He backed down. I left shortly afterwards to a rival company and made it my business to wreck them. Story 70. Work at daycare. A parent got in a disagreement with one of our employees over something pretty dumb. Parent was in the wrong, but my coworker could have handled it better. Parent wanted the employee fired, which was definitely overdoing it. Supervisor refused. So the mother was now pissed at both my coworker and my supervisor. The mom ended up getting several other parents together and complaining to the owner. Both my coworker and supervisor were fired. Morale in that place dropped. Not only was every other employee pissed, but we were now short-handed. It went from being a place where I was legitimately involved and concerned about the babies and their future to just another job, and it showed. Kids could tell, parents could tell, owner could tell. We went from being the #1 rated childcare center to just another daycare. Story 71. I worked as a consultant for a company. After a few weeks, I quickly found out this one guy had his own one-man automation department, and he was a top-tier coder, could whip out solutions in hours that other developers would languish for weeks on. I also found out that nearly every department used his tool and services to automate their process. At some point, halfway through my project, they fired him and got rid of his tool. Almost immediately, all the company metrics tanked. In most cases, 30 to 55. After a few weeks, the company was desperate and asked for him to come back. He told them to duck off as he interviewed for their biggest competitor, and they offered him 2x his original salary there. They ended up hiring another person who wasn't nearly as good to replace him, then another person, and then another. When I left and the department had around 10 people, and they still hadn't gotten their metrics to back to before they let the original guy go. In almost all their departments, they were losing staff left and right as people were stressed out trying to do more work that was previously automated. Story 72. I worked at a pizza place a few years ago. The pay was incredible for the job, 6 an hour flat rate, tips, and 52 cents a mile. I was making like $600 a week after taxes just to deliver pizza. Everyone loved the job. The owner decided to decrease to pay to 7.25 while in the store, 2.13 on the road, and $1 per run. This resulted in about a $200 decrease every check. Half the drivers left. Story 73. Company I worked for has had several. They killed meetings where everyone could get on the same page, simply because the boss couldn't handle public constructive criticism. They changed the methods by which pay tip sharing worked for supervisors without notice and attempted short-sighted pay structure changes to the employees. When the employees figured this out, it was at first denied. Then we were told it was none of our concern, even though it affected all of our pay. Story 74. Offered company-branded cash as an incentive to work harder and clear claims more quickly. People busted their asses, worked unpaid overtime. E-seat, we were all salary, to earn this cash because it could be used for things like TVs, vacation, and a million other things. I accumulated close to $1,400 of this fake money, busting my ass to get enough for the cash bonus. They never let us redeem them. After our busy season was over, they just let it drop. Everyone kept asking about it, and they would blow it off with emails about updating you soon. Never happened. A bunch of people had donated their extra company cash to one worker who was using it to get items for a charity auction. We continued to bother the company. They never let us redeem them for anything. It was total bullcrap. I quit shortly after. I just walked out one day. When I got home, I blasted a long, blistering, company-wide email criticizing them for the lack of respect for their workers. According to those I know that still work there, very few due to the wave of turnover I apparently triggered, I am a legend. No one ever got anything for their code blue bucks. Story 75. My coworker lost his dog and came into work teary-eyed. Our manager looked at him, asked him what's wrong, and then proceeded to go on a 30-minute rant about him needing to toughen up. And it's just a stupid animal. Go buy another dumb dog. Needless to say, she no longer works for the company. Story 76. Worked at a very dodgy debt management company a few years ago as I was stuck for work and it's all I could get at the time. Management were awful. Most days at least. One employee would leave sobbing and they seemed to really get a kick out of it. After a meeting where one girl stood her ground and told them she felt she was being bullied, they decided to bring this up in a team meeting. One manager's exact words were, "We've been told by a team member that we come across as bullies. So please, if you feel like we're bullying you or anyone else, put your hand up now." Yep, we were in complete silence for at least a minute. I eventually got sacked as I was asking too many questions and discovered where their money was actually going. Story 77. A satellite TV provider canceled the bonuses for a 2-month competition in the last couple weeks for a group of their customer service reps. We were busting our butts, helping out new customers that had problems and really turned around customer satisfaction scores. We never saw a bonus from that incentive. The company pulled the same crap later on in the year, completely reneging on a bonus. This company disavowed incentives multiple times, and managers knowingly miscalculated bonuses, even though it was printed on literature given to employees. I was only there a year and a half. Terrible morale. Story 78. They gave us all a nice raise because so many people were leaving to go work at a competitor that paid more. Then management changed around, and when it came time for our scheduled, smaller annual COLA raise, they said that our previous raise was just to get us through till the COLA, and they were taking away our previous raise and making us pay part of it back. But at least we could pay it back over several paychecks. So many people gave their 2 weeks notice that day and the next that they changed their mind within a week. Story 79. We had a bonus program instituted last year around March to be tabulated early January. It pretty much vanished. No formal announcement on getting or not getting the bonus or anything. One employee asked and was told, "We made too many mistakes. I had to make deductions," which wasn't an established rule for the program. The rest of us were wise enough to realize it was all bullcrap from the beginning and weren't surprised on the 1E on the program. We were supposed to have another go at the bonus this year, but it's almost August and we haven't heard crap. We always jokingly ask each other, "Does this affect my bonus?" Story 80. Production manager got tired of sales staff being overpaid and went into the bookkeeper's spreadsheets that were in an open file on the server, printed out everyone's salary, and left copies on the break room table. 3 people quit that day. Story 81. Had a boss that got upset when nobody answered his question quick enough on a conference call. So he told all of us techs to bring in our uniforms and tools the next day, and he would decide who stays and who leaves. He only fired 1 person that day, but the rest of us found other jobs and quit within the next couple weeks. So he ended up having hundreds of clients and only 4 techs, his family, to do all the work. What is the most unreasonable thing an employer has asked you to do? Story 1. Over the phone with my manager's manager. You're working the weekend, right? Me. No. Manager. You're working the weekend. But no. Manager. It needs doing. No. Ask someone who wants to. Manager. The project will fall behind. Me. At minimum wage, I really don't care. Manager. Would you like disciplinary then? Me. Would you like me to send a recording of this call to HR? Manager. What? Don't lie to me. I'm putting you on disciplinary. Me. I'll see you in the office then. Go to the office. Give recording of call to HR and manager gets disciplinary. I was only an apprentice and it absolutely wrecked him. The project was behind anyway, crafty planners, and lost about 20 grand. Story 2. I had a boss who expected her subordinates to refrain from using the toilet until after deadline had passed, to the point where if you tried to go, she would tell you to sit back down and hold it because that's what I'm doing. Karen, if you choose to do so, good for you, but don't expect the rest of us to suffer. Story 3. Just this week, I got told off by my boss for working 7 days in a row. If that happens, the 7th day is overtime, and I get paid double. But I was asked if I could come in on a day off. I agreed. No rules broken. If I want the work, then I have every right to say yes to an offered shift. He then told me I could only work 3 days this week to avoid overtime again, but my contract has me on for 5 days and he can't override it without breaking policy. He also tried avoiding paying me the overtime, but another manager called him out on it. That's twice that I've heard he's tried to do something like that to me. I'm hoping I get this new job so I can nuke the bridges and tell him to go duck himself. Story 4. I was a lifeguard at a water park with slides and high-ass metal towers and all that stuff. As a rule, we are not allowed to leave our post unless it's for a rescue or evacuation due to weather being bad and stuff. When that happens, we would get the call on our radios. In the middle of a lightning storm, the owner of the place wouldn't give the okay to evacuate patrons from the slides and pools and stuff. It was getting unnerving being at the top of a glorified lightning rod. The patrons who stayed despite the wind, rain, cold, and ducking lightning seemed to care more about getting their money's worth than the potential danger of lightning mixed with water. But I digress. Anyhow, eventually the lifeguards got sick of feeling unsafe so we evacuated the place ourselves. The owner was not happy, but what was he gonna do? Fire all of us in the middle of the season? Story 5. When I was younger, I worked for a subcontractor who was a sloped roofer. He told me he didn't have workers' insurance if I fell off the roof. He told me if I fell off the roof, he'd drive me to the hospital, and I was supposed to tell them I was hit by a car. I tell that story to people now, and they can't believe it. Story 6. I work in a healthcare facility. While overall we provide great care, we have a few bad apples working there. One of those bad apples is the Karen who runs the kitchen. Last week, she served spoiled milk to our patients. When I went to her to resolve the matter, she flipped out on me. She even yelled at my boss about how I was being disrespectful. The thing is, I'm just a CNA for now, getting my BSN, and I have zero power at work. I only make $13 an hour, and that salary is so low that I won't ever compromise my values for that company. I'm sorry, Face. I won't compromise my values for $13 an hour. On the plus side, despite expecting to get in trouble over this, I did not. In fact, management actually likes me more because I stood up for our patients against a terrible woman that they've all been having to deal with too. So I stood up for my patients, gained some allies in management, and feel good about myself too. But seriously, don't serve spoiled milk to sick people and expect me to go along with it. Story 7. In college, I worked at a fast food Mexican restaurant, not Taco Bell, a popular 24-hour one in Texas. We were required to show up 10 minutes early, start work, then clock in when our shift started. We got yelled at if we forgot to clock in on time. In addition, I was the only employee who couldn't speak Spanish, and there were 3 who couldn't speak English. So I was told that to keep my job, I needed to learn Spanish. Not a bad idea for personal growth, but seems like a big undertaking for a job that paid $3.35 an hour. Luckily, I soon found another job that paid $4.65 an hour, so I was living the high life. Story 8. So I work an internship, a sports governing body. We call it Ducksticks.org, or FSO for short. FSO sends me to handle social media for a softball semifinals finals event. Now the venue is hot as crap because we are based in the South, talking upper 90s. So basically we packed for 4 days of stay, working 16 to 18-hour days. I was told we would wear a work polo, khaki shorts, and sneakers. Important note, this has been the uniform for 4+ years. There is one press box with no AC and very little shade anywhere at park. There are always multiple games happening at once, so there's lots of running around in the sun. Fast forward 2 days in and the high-up guy rolls in. This old grizzly dude comes in for like 45 minutes and leaves. Then he proceeds to call our office manager and quite literally scream at her over the phone, to the point allegedly other people in offices comes in to see if she's okay after thinking there was an emergency. Why? Because the staff was in khaki shorts. So here's the bullcrap request. The communications department, i.e. my other boss and me, leave the event, go to Target and buy khakis with our own funds. We basically sent back up the chain that it's horse crap to tell us one thing, then on a whim, make us spend money for new khaki pants in the middle of a championship event. So we negotiated to leaving early next morning and using company fund. Basically, my revenge was making them buy the most expensive khakis I could find at Target and getting them hella dirty. Boss rolls in the next day can obviously see all my clay stains that happen from having to kneel on clay, but can't say crap. Story 9. Work overtime without actually being on the clock and getting paid for it. Ended up fired a week later, but it totally wasn't related. Yeah, right. Story 10. Prospective employer. At a job interview for a designated driver's service. You'll be working from the hours of 10 p.m. to about 4 a.m., so we need you to be awake at those hours. You will pick up another employee, or they will pick you up. One of you will follow the car you're driving home. The person in the drunk person's car will get paid minimum wage for every hour they're in the car, and the person following gets 50% of the tip. We only cover mileage for when you're following the car, followed by, we want to hire you immediately, so please fill out this sheet of paper and we can get you working immediately. I walked out of the office and never called them again. I'm not working 6 hours a night and destroying my social life to potentially get paid $0 nightly if some drunk forgets to tip. My actual employers have been much better. Story 11. During college, I worked part-time delivering flowers for a florist. Knowing I was a music major, the owner of the business decided to offer singing messages for Valentine's Day deliveries at an extra charge to customers. People would compose things to be sung, many of them syrupy or corny, with the flowers to be delivered. I told the boss that I was a keyboard major, not a voice major, and he said, it didn't matter, either sing it or wing it. It worked out fine though, because most of the women I delivered to loved my singing and personal touch. I made much more in tips too. Story 12. I worked at Circuit City. I was asked to open a new computer, create the recovery disk, and make several copies of it to sell as a copy of Windows XP. Didn't do it, was fired soon after. Story 13. I worked in a grocery store meat department and just had to clean up all of the equipment and the back room. It was a lengthy job, but boss insisted that I only needed 4 hours to do this. I also had to serve customers and package their meat and whatnot. Keep in mind, I was the only person in the department for each of those shifts. One day I had a pretty nasty cold, mucusy coughing, and constantly running nose. So I hit him up a good 8 hours in advance, and minimum is 4 AHRs prior to starting the shift, saying I can't come in because it's just not hygienic. He says I need to find a person to cover me, or I need to come in. There's only 2 other people on my position, both of which said they were busy. I told him this, and he said, well, it looks like you need to come in then. I say, fine, I'll be sure to have a chat with the store manager before my shift. That set him straight, and he told me he will find someone. It just pissed me off that managers think they can force our hand and think we won't do crap about it, especially since I was 18 at the time. You better believe I'm taking that crap to the big boss, especially when it involves germs and food. Story 14. Oh, so many things. I was the personal exec assistant to the CEO of a very small and failing marketing firm. Some that stand out, not telecounting that the investment we received was for $25,000 and not the $15,000 he reported. He pocketed the rest. I couldn't turn my phone off on weekends in case he needed me. Wear more flattering, read tighter, clothes when important visitors came. Not wear my hair in a ponytail because it looked better down. I live in a ponytail. Absolutely not. Nobody in the office could get upset or question any of his requests during office time. That was strictly for after 5 p.m. These are just the office-related ones. The crap he said out of work hours was on another level. Got out of there as fast as I could. Story 15. I was the marketing manager, and we had a stall at a major computer exhibition, and I was to host and run a bingo giveaway. I got a buddy to get a pro sound house to loan us a PA, mixer, and mic. Cool. A few months later, my boss told me his in-laws were visiting and he wanted to host a party for a weekend. He asked if I can get a PA free of charge. I got the package and installed it with his brother in his garden. He was meant to disassemble it every night and bring it indoors. I came back from Xmas vacation and he left the PA out for 1 week. Never brought it in. He insisted he did bring it in, but as we loaded it into my Jeep, condensation was dripping from inside the speakers and mixer. I've never been so angry. I offered to pay damages, but they didn't take it. Duck my boss. The sound company knew it was for my boss. They were helping me do a favor. This is also the same boss who said when my dog died, no big deal. At least it wasn't a human. Story 16. I was working in an English program overseas, and the boss came to me one day and said we were going to have a summer day camp type thing, which would be like 3 days a week for 2 months, and he wanted me to run it. It would have about 660 students, ranging from kindergarten to 6th grade. Fine, cool. I ask if the school has any theme planned, or anything they particularly want me to do. Nope. Okay, fine, I'm not really paid enough to put in that much extra work to plan this, but whatever, I'll deal. I ask when it is planned to start in 5 days. What? You want me to plan a 2-month summer camp for 60 kids and you couldn't bother to tell me about it until 5 days before? The kids were all registered for it already, so the school obviously had been planning on doing this for a while without ever mentioning it to me. That was bad enough, but the real kicker is when I acted a little hesitant and they were like, no, it'll be fine, and you don't really need to plan anything. Great idea. I'll just spend 6 hours a week for 2 months with 60 kids and not have a plan. That'll work out really well, I'm sure. What they didn't know is that I was already on the verge of mental breakdown from working for them 6 days a week for 2 years, and I just quit the next week and went to stay with my parents for a month before going back and finding a new job. Story 17. Get customers through the drive-thru in under a minute. Customers didn't want to get through the drive-thru in under a minute. They wanted to look in their bag and make sure all the food was in there, and unwrap the straw and put the straw in their cup, and put the cup in the cup holder, and make sure their bag of food was settled securely, and put their wallet away and check their phone, and then drive away. Story 18. Worked in a shop that did sound lighting gear. We had a things to do list, which was busy tasks, and one was to clean the fog machine. This is done by running distilled water through the machine as opposed to the usual fog fluid. Only we didn't have distilled water in the shop. I asked the owner, it was a small shop, to buy some, and this goes on for weeks. Finally, I just bought a bottle at the store when I went for lunch one day. I finished the task and then begin to pour the remainder of the bottle out off the back loading dock. The owner freaks out, starts yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" And I stop. He's the cheapest mother ducker that I've ever come across. And I say, "What? I'm just dumping it. Do you know how much this costs?" "Yeah, about $2,050. Why are you doing this?" "I didn't tell you to dump it out." "Well, I paid for it and I choose to dump it." "I can't believe you're doing this. Stop now. I'd pay you for it." "Nah, I think I'm happier dumping this out." This was just one of many stories like this. I strive to give this man a self-inflicted heart attack from losing his mind, about wasting money. Story 19. I was working in an aluminum foundry. We had a barn with some stock materials that no one ever used. One day the owner approaches me and says, "Want to do something illegal?" The barn had a new family of wasps that made a home up on the ceiling. The owner asks me, the youngest one, to destroy it. So he puts a wood pallet on a forklift and hoists me 25 feet in the air. I was very well protected from any stings through many layers of welding clothing, masks, and so on. But what I wasn't prepared for is how ducking hot it would be at the roof of this old barn in the summertime. So I spray the wasp killer and see the poor duckers falling to their death, knock the nest over, and it falls. Where does it fall? Next to my boss, using he forklift, who takes off because not every wasp is dead. So now I'm in an extremely hot suit, 25 feet above the ground without fall protection. The only way I can get down is for my boss to lower the forklift, but he can't access it because there's a wasp's nest and I have the only can of wasp killer. I kept spraying that area, hoping it would kill them. And eventually, he got me down. Couldn't have been longer than 15 minutes. But I need to remind you that it was really hot. Story 20. I was a waitress and was out sick with a raging UTI and bladder infection. The manager kept calling to get me to come back in, even though I had a doctor's note and had ended up in the hospital with a fever. I said no one last time, and he said, "We. That's what you get for ducking your black boyfriend." Scream! What did you just say to me? Full stop. I calmly said, "I am reporting you to every single level of this corporate restaurant chain. You're an awful human being." Called the general manager, then the district manager, then the head of human resources, and finally the VP of operation. They asked me for a meeting the following, and I went. They apologized formally, asked if I had contacted a lawyer. I had not, and promised to make it up to me if I wanted to come back to work. I didn't. They gave me a check for $1,000 for my medical bills and a letter of reference. And he got fired. Story 21. I did some contract development with a law firm. The owner of this law firm was quite enamored with his own voice, looks, and presumably the size of his junk, which was apparently very small, based on his car collection. So, these guys asked me over time, 1, to change how the database worked, so they could submit false claims to the state. 2, to change the date and time of stuff posted to the database. So the monthly numbers came out better. Once they had 3 slow months in a row, and in order to get the closing number they liked, they closed one month as late as the 20th, May, then opened July. There was no June that year, therefore June was not unprofitable. 3. The COO asked me for a substances connection, since his had just gotten arrested. Oh, so very many with those idiots. Of course, they were paying us around 20 claws a month in the heyday, and they had super hot chicks that worked there and liked to party. So let's just say we did some of the less reputable things requested of us. Story 22. Oh hell, I could probably think of a ton of things, but this one is probably the stupidest. I got into a big argument with my boss and coworkers about this. I worked in the post office of a university. We were all university employees, not USP's employees. So USP's regulations are not relevant here. We set our own policies about how to handle the mail. When students receive packages in the mail, or by UPS or FedEx, etc., that were too big to fit in their mailbox, they had to come to the window to pick it up. Naturally, we required the student to show some kind of ID so that we could be sure we were handing over the package to its rightful owner instead of some imposter who intended to steal it. That's only reasonable, right? Well, in my opinion, any kind of picture ID should be sufficient. A driver's license or a passport. We had a lot of foreign students who didn't have driver's licenses, at least not American ones, or the ID issued by the university. However, my boss decided that we should only accept the official ID issued by the university. By the way, the official IDs were printed on cheap plastic that was far inferior to, say, a credit card or a driver's license. If students put them in their hip pockets and sat on them, they would eventually break, and the print would get rubbed off and the pictures would fade. And a lot of students would lose their IDs, or the IDs would become so broken and shabby that the students quit carrying them around. And every other office on campus had some alternative way of letting students get services without showing their ID. The food service would let students eat without an ID. The library would let them borrow books without an ID. I think most students memorize their ID number. And I think those other services would let them key in their number to a keypad. We didn't have a keypad or a card reader. Yet my boss thought we should be the one department on campus that was hard-nosed about this. And there was no practical reason for it. I argued against this policy till I was blue in the face. I did get her to back down a bit, to a compromise position. She would allow me to allow exceptions to the policy on a case-by-case basis. However, if a student had only a driver's license or passport as ID, I was supposed to lecture them about the importance of always carrying their official student ID. Duck that crap. I never lectured anybody. I accepted their passport with a smile. Story 23. Once when I was a hostess in Japan, a club that hired me had a policy of weighing the girls at the start of each week. And if they gained weight, they'd receive a penalty. If they continued to gain weight, they'd be fired. Most of the girls were working illegally and didn't have a leg to stand on in the face of these rules. But I quit the night I found out about them. Story 24. First day working in this pub, the pub kind of had a reputation of serving underage kids. I asked what the deal was with that after having drank there from the age of 16 onwards. The manager just didn't give a duck. He honestly said, if it's really busy and they aren't bothering anyone, serve them. If it's really dead and we need the business, serve them. The only time he wanted me to not serve them was when the regulars were in as not to disrupt them. I refused. I did most people, and then people whose aid I suspected were fake. I wouldn't serve shots to them. This one girl, who was about 15 drinking lemonade all night, to the best of my belief, was absolutely paralytic at the end of the night, had to ring an ambulance. The manager tried to completely throw me under the bus to the owner and tried to put the blame on me for the girl being hospitalized. I got sacked a few days later for something really trivial. Hated that place. Story 25. Yay, one I can answer. So I worked for a crazy lady who was trying to get a cooking show off the ground. It never happened. She also ran a nonprofit that was supposed to get kids into reading. I say ran because in the 2 years I worked for her, I never saw anyone do any kind of activity with the nonprofit. They sure did collect donations for it though. The worst thing she would make us do is beg for free crap. She made me hit up a large gourmet grocery for a donation to the nonprofit, which of course she was planning to use for the for-profit cooking show. They generously donated about $400 worth of any food in the store. She sent me to pick it up, and my instructions before I left were, ask for more. Don't leave until they give you extra. I'm going to call and find out if you asked, so you better not say you're going to ask, then not do it. Of course I didn't ask. I have other stories about her. She was the worst narcissist I have ever had the displeasure of knowing. Story 26. Make me deal with a verbally abusive customer who would threaten to come down to the shop to take his frustrations out on me. My boss would tell him what days I was working. If he ever answered the phone before me, he would put him on hold and tell me someone was asking for me. Wouldn't tell me who until I picked it up and realized. After that, same chain but different store and manager, I was made to deal with a guy that was trying to stalk me. They'd tell him what days I was on, if I was at lunch, and if I'd said where I was going, or call me out to the floor and surprise me with him being there. Honestly, the worst job I've had in my life, and I've had a lot of crafty jobs where I got bullied. Story 27. I work in the software industry. It's worth mentioning that at this particular company, we weren't working on anything revolutionary, but it was common knowledge that all of us had our own noteworthy side projects we were working on from home on our own time. In many cases, our side projects were how the company heard about us and hired us in the first place. So after working there over a year, many of the other devs had been working there even longer, we were all asked to sign a non-compete. In case you're not aware, this sort of paperwork is usually presented at the time of hire. It's shady as duck to randomly start asking employees to sign this sort of thing a year or more into employment. You should also understand that this was not your normal non-compete. In pretty clear language, this non-compete stated that the company would own all code and intellectual property written or thought up by us from before we worked there, while we worked there, and after we worked there indefinitely, and that upon our departure, we were not supposed to work for another software company located anywhere in America. Regardless of if this contract would actually be enforceable, probably not. You could say we were a little more than offended by our boss having the gall to even ask us to sign such a piece of crap agreement. After work that day, all the devs met in the parking lot to care and discuss the next course of action. Since we all agreed, there was no way we were signing this. As we're talking, the boss comes out and we all get into a huge argument with him about how we're not signing off everything we've ever written or will write to him. Things finally calmed down and we thought he saw our side and was going to have the lawyers modify the language to make it more suitable. The very next week, that Git hands out duplicate copies of the very same non-compete and threatens us that if we don't sign, we're fired. Pretty much everyone walked without signing and found new jobs within the week, and that company is no longer in business. Story 28. Take responsibility for $300 that my boss stole from the register and lie that we had less inventory than delivered because she was drinking in the freezer during work hours. Quit 2 weeks later. Story 29. Expected us to pay out of pocket for drive-offs on our shift. Was a gas station. Her store policy was pump before you pay to draw customers into the store. All it did was cost her hundreds in lost gasoline every month. All the other employees actually came back after check cashing on payday and would hand her cash to cover the lost revenue. I was refusing to pay her one day, and the guy who drove off came back and told me he felt bad and paid for his gas, but I still quit the following week. I got fired from a retail shop for not driving 4 minutes on my day off to attend an unpaid mandatory meeting. Nope, you buy my time, not take it. They tried to make me work on my birthday too, regardless of our pre-employment agreement. My birthday was the only day of the year I will not work. Up yours, buddy. Funniest part was it was a comic book store, and I was a lovely young lady, and I increased their sales because all I had to do was giggle and agree how awesome so-and-so comic dude was, and those nerdy guys would buy stacks of comics and graphic novels. The store did shut down about 3 months after they canned me, so it was doing bad for a while. Story 30. Worked at a construction inspection firm. I'd been a long-term temp for them before, and they brought me on full-time. First day on the full-time job, they call me to the back of the office, plunk 6 or 7 huge binders in front of me. They're stained and warped, and they stink. They say, "We need the information in here, but the pages got messed up, so we need to scan all of it into a PDF." I say, "What happened?" They say, "Oh, they got left in somebody's truck for a few weeks. They got rained on a couple of times. They're incredibly moldy and mildewed, with white, black, and brown mold. Some of the pages literally give off spores when you turn them. It's going to take me the better part of 2 days to get through all of it. They have offered 0 protective equipment. I ask for a mask and gloves. My manager seems confused. I point out the cornucopia of mold. My manager looks at me like I'm being very unreasonable and says, "We don't have anything like that around here." To reiterate, this is a construction inspection company, full of construction inspectors who follow and regulate OSHA requirements. Magnanimously, my manager allows me to go out and get my own, with my own money. They do not ever reimburse me. When I request reimbursement, they tell me it was your choice to buy them. I later discover that they had me scan them because the project manager who needed them didn't want to be exposed to the mold. I honestly don't know what it says about me that I continued to work for them for nearly a year after that. Story 31. I was asked to go on a business trip to NYC for 10 days. My position was salaried as an executive assistant, so no overtime pay. Turns out I was brought along so they wouldn't have to pay the nanny hourly, since they wanted a babysitter 20 hours a day. They even booked a connected room with 2 beds, for me and their 3-year-old. Baby got to sleep in my room for 1 day before I complained. One of many ridiculous things my boss asked for. Waiting in a 5-block line to hold spots for them to watch the 4th of July show on the Hudson. They expected me to then take the baby home when they got there and babysit all night. After 2 hours and finding out there was no way to hold spots, they asked me to meet them at the hotel about 9 p.m. They ended up not coming back until 11 and said they stayed out at a rooftop restaurant to watch the show. I got to walk all the way back in the rain for nothing. When I asked for an afternoon off, I was accused of just wanting to do substances and party. I quit after working 9 days with barely a lunch break, booked a later flight home, and took the rest of the time to enjoy a free visit to the city. Story 32. Worked for a gym physio practice. Lots of costumers had a medical fitness card. These had to be approved of by a physical therapist. Costumer could do fitness for free as the health insurance paid for it. After our physios approved a medical membership, each visit was declared to the health insurance as a full 30-minute one-to-one physical therapy treatment, whether the therapist had seen the costumer or not. Health insurance company got hold of this, changed the rules. I had to ask costumers to take on the prime insurance. Our company would pay the difference, $220 for a year. We kept on declaring all these therapy sessions, $30 for 30 minutes, but Karen Boss never paid our costumers back. I was told to lie to the costumers, telling them that they would get the mommy back in the next month, and the next, and the next, and so on. Along with that, personnel was treated like crap, yelled at and humiliated in public. Nothing was ever good enough. One day, Miss Karenface wakes up with this brilliant idea, and we all have to throw everything overboard and go with her idea. The next day, she wakes up with another plan, which we magically should understand immediately, with only minor explanation, and we have to abandon course and follow the new one. Not immediately understanding or agreeing would result in public humiliation. Sick days are taken out of holidays, work outside of scheduled hours, not paid, payment agreements weren't kept, contracts always came months later than the actual starting date, etc. Once I quit my job, Karenface refused to pay my salary and that of many other colleagues. We got together and sued. I'm glad I kept track of all of my hours. I got everything paid for in the end. Ever since I left that company, my life has only improved. Story 33. I was a full-time student and she was making me work all day on Saturdays and Sundays all of a sudden, aka my only days off. I was gone from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Physically demanding job. If you didn't get the memo, it sucked. After a few weeks, my grades were dropping, and I was freaking the duck out because I had no time to do my crap. I asked her for a Sunday off. Note, the year I was there, I had only asked for time off twice. She blew up over this, then told me, "I know you have school and all, but other jobs would fire you for asking for a Sunday off." Cue gaslighting rant. 2 months later, I quit and was talking to a manager at my new job about it. They basically said, "WTF, that's unreasonable. We value your education and try to do our best to work out work schedules that won't interfere with your schoolwork. My boss made me think I was the bad guy, and I felt so guilty about it for so long. Story 34. I was fired 2 weeks into my first ever real job. It was a sandwich place that specialized in steam subs and steam nachos. What really sucks is that the food was incredible and the job was easy. Unfortunately, the store owner didn't know what he was doing, and it was his first time running a restaurant. Because of this, we were always running out of stuff. This guy told me I had to buy a bulk mayo jar out of pocket. I told him he couldn't do that, but that isn't what he fired me for. The store was right across from the Varsity Theater at LSU, and on game day, traffic is blocked across the entire campus. This slows what seems like all of Baton Rouge down to a halt. This ducker asked me to come in on my off day, on game day, because he only had 2 people in shop and didn't bother showing up himself. I said fine, I'll take overtime, and then he fired me for getting there 45 minutes late. Ducking, clarifying a few things. I didn't just show up late. I was stuck in traffic for nearly an hour and 15 minutes to get to work on a day I wasn't scheduled for. I had plans that I canceled to be there because he didn't understand how busy game day was. As for buying condiments, it was his fault he didn't stock properly. Expecting a dirt-poor college kid making minimum wage to pay for your mistake out of pocket without reimbursement is ducked up. Story 35. Boss, you can't take that day off to spend time with your family who flew across the Pacific to visit you for 2 days, because I have to take that day off to take my dog out to a park event. Quit the job on that requested day, and the boss missed her dog park party. Story 36. Had a supervisor once get one of those bells you'd ring a desk clerk for and expected me to run over every time he rang it. I was pretty young at the time and wasn't 100% sure if he was serious. He was. Story 37. One of the schools I worked for put a lot of pressure on me and other teachers to give failing seniors a D so that they would pass and they wouldn't have to deal with it. It would be one thing if I had a student with a 59% in just my class, but we're talking about multiple students who had percentages in single digits in multiple classes, and the principal told us, oh, just pass them. Story 38. I had a double ear infection and a sinus infection. I had a 3-day fever and felt like I was gonna die. My work wanted me to come in. They were furious when I said no. I worked with special needs teens in a group home. Story 39. 2 of the male managers, one of them doubles as part owner at the pizza place I work at, are married with children. My girlfriend, another manager does the schedule, also has a child. She is expected to find babysitters half the week, and on the days she can't find a babysitter, her kid has to hang out at the store all night. She sees her kid all of 12 waking hours at home each week, as the other half her kid goes to her dad's. On the flip side, if she needs to take off or needs her male counterparts to cover a shift for someone, they say they got the kids and can't do it, even though my GF brings her kid to work. Or if they do it, they Karen and moan. One of them, the part owner, only works 25 hours a week, gets paid over $20 an hour, and still careenies about his minimal responsibilities and compares seeing his kids 6 days a week to my GF's 2. It's a complete double standard. So much less is expected of them, yet they get so many more benefits. They do as little work as possible, while the younger of us do everything. And they walk around like the store would crumble without them. Half of us are planning a straight-up exodus because the majority owner doesn't give 2 craps about how awful the part owner is. Story 40. Got hired on temp to hire as an office manager, accountant, HR person by a temp agency for a small startup manufacturing company. Goes okay for a bit, though I'm being paid on the low end for one of those positions, let alone all of them. At one point, my boss at the company asked me to do this minor thing and get the name of the company being billed for my temp services changed to the startup company's name. I made the call, thought it was no big deal. Turns out, it was. They'd actually argued back and forth profusely on this before he'd backed down and said they could use his original company's name. This was because the original company had been around for a while and had a credit history and such, while the startup was brand new and was not going to be able to pass a credit check. So if he wanted to use that name, then he'd have to pay for my services up front every week. He hadn't wanted to do that, so he said they could use his old company's info. So basically, he asked me to renegotiate my own contract and framed it to me as a simple clerical issue. And when I couldn't get it done, he yelled at me and lectured me profusely. When I finally had enough, after he'd brought it up yet again, in addition to many other unreasonable requests, he let me go. Story 41. I worked at a local chain of video stores as a young adult. The owner was a super slimy fellow, and we had an illegal video lottery machine in the back room at one of the locations, and I was expected to let these absolutely terrifying characters in via the back door to use it while I was working. Alone. They would often be drunk and belligerent and aggressive and make a disgusting mess in the bathroom that I had to use. Also, the owner fired all the staff at one location because he suspected they were stealing and made me work there for 4 weeks. 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. every day by myself with no breaks. I knew it was against labor laws, but also knew he would not pay me if I complained. He was a real duck face. In the end, he sold the stores without telling us. So I showed up for work one day and there was a padlock on the door. Story 42. Working for a computer repair company, my boss came in one morning and told me, "I want you to download every driver and save it to the server." Me thinking he just wanted server drivers or something. I said, "Okay, which ones?" My boss says, "All of them." I look at him in total disbelief and say, "Every sound card driver, every NICE driver, every motherboard and chipset driver, every video card driver?" He said, "Yes, is that a problem?" I asked, "Why the hell would you need me to do this?" He said, "So, we have them." I'm sitting there, slack-jawed in total astonishment when he says, "How long will it take? A couple of hours." I say, "Months, a couple of months." He said, "Well, you better get started. Oh, and I want the Windows 98, NT4, and XP drivers for each one." This was before Windows 7. So I start with video card drivers, AT, Nvidia. I don't get more than an hour into this when he comes in and says, "Stop, forget it. You're using up too much internet bandwidth. Forget about it." Story 43. When I was in my 20s, I was doing some commercial painting for a shotgun outfit because I had a good deal of experience already in commercial painting. So the end of the job was wrapping up and we were color coding chase pipes. I'd almost finished up and there was about a 2-foot section left to do on a cold water line that took a 90-degree turn and went into a cement catch. Basically 3-foot by 3-foot hole that went about 5 feet deep into the foundation. It was almost full of water and what smelled like stagnant piss. He wanted me to climb in it to paint the last bit of that pipe. I asked if we were going to get a pump and pump the water out. He said no and told me that if I didn't get in, I could look for another job. I turned around and headed for the sink to clean out my brushes. He asked what I was doing, and I told him that there was no way in hell I was climbing down in that nasty crap and that the job was almost finished anyway. That he could do it if it meant that much to him. The first and only one of 3 times I straight up quit a job. Story 44. Marketing development at a nonprofit. Every year we do a golf outing and some other kind of dinner gala. The golf outing usually plans itself. Our new CEO, who is otherwise totally awesome, took that to assume it just magically happens overnight. A week or so after he showed up, the following happened. He moved the date of the gala and the golf event to be back-to-back with just a month separating them. He fired our coup. He raised the prices of our sponsorship levels. And then he asked for 200 attendees at both events. To explain, most of our big sponsors do 2 or even 3 events a year when they are spread out, not a month apart. Most of our big sponsors were friends and contacts of the KOU he fired. I don't need to explain why raising prices is bad. The gala was a decent success, but we did not have 200 people there. Closer to 100 and maybe 30 of them were our staff who came for free. Golf is coming up. We are nowhere near 30 golfers, let alone 200. Story 45. I recently had this come up. I'm in construction and remodeling. With my most recent employer, I was very upfront and honest. I can build a house to 100% complete, between slab and roof. I don't do concrete, and I don't do roofs. I'm too big for a roof, and concrete put me out of work for 2 years from the sheer physical taxation of it. He agreed. First day on the job, he had me level a bathroom floor, ducking concrete. But only 1 wheelbarrow full, so I just shut up and did it. At the end of the day, I talked to him about it, reiterating that concrete is what ducked up my leg the first time. He apologized, and things were good for a few weeks. The last time, he takes me to a new site and has me digging footings for a slab, which is exactly what broke me for 2 years. "Boss, we had this conversation and you agreed. I don't do concrete." He flipped his crap and we parted ways. Wife left work to come get me. Story 46. I worked in it for my university and I needed the money, so I did some crappy grunt work. I was sent into the crawl space of multiple buildings to check hardware, stuck coming in at 5 a.m. to re-image an entire lab because the professor responsible for it was not all there, shattered an old Mobo in my hand, and had to finish out my shift before I was allowed to fish the pieces out, clean it. But what truly got me in trouble for insubordination was refusing to run Cat 5 through a building. All of the old cables had to be pulled out, and the new ones run. But we were provided no respirators, eye protection, or proper ventilation. I'd already caught some nasty sick from being shoved into crawl spaces, and the hell if I was spending an entire summer in a ceiling with nothing to save my lung. This is also the job where my boss decided to crash my apartment, drunk, and try to sleep with me after helping himself to my booze. It was a weird place. Story 47. I was in Chennai during the floods in 2015. Every day I worked, it was a minimum of 9 hours, but often 11 or 12 hours, but for 4 or 5 days, can't remember exactly, it felt like an eternity. I couldn't work at all because we were stuck in the hotel, watching the river outside that used to be a street and watching the terrible displacement of people on the news. And when I got home, they wanted me to agree to let them put my overtime hours toward those days when I couldn't work. I stood my ground though, and I did get my pay eventually, but man, that was when I really got just how eager they were to screw me over if it meant saving a dime. Story 48. I used to work in the upstairs part of the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. The ground floor is the casino, but if you go upstairs, they have an IMAX theater, strip club, arcade, restaurant, and different concession stands. And I worked at one of these concession stands. It was around Christmas, and it was not very crowded, and I had to call in the total sales every night to my boss at the end of the night. When I told them the particularly low total, they were angry with me that I wasn't selling hard enough. Hustling sales was part of the job, and that I had to stay there until I made one more sale. I was pretty young back then, so I felt bad and stayed. Unbeknownst to me, the entire upstairs section had been sealed off with velvet ropes hours earlier for whatever reason, and that was the reason no one was there. I stayed until 2 a.m. Story 49. I have migraines that very rarely leave me half blind and puking. When this happens, it's not pretty and I shouldn't really be working. Told my manager and he told me to puke in the toilet and get back to work without the use of my left eye. Story 50. My first part-time job was working in the cafe inside a department store. I was 16 years old at the time and my boss was utterly awful. He refused to let me leave work after I'd slipped a disc in my lower back and could barely move. And before this, he used to repeatedly tell me to skip school to cover other employees' shifts. He also took a dislike to one of the other young girls who worked there and put her on constant pot washing duties for the duration of every 8-hour shift, instead of swapping her around onto other tasks like he did with everyone else. I think we were all too scared to stand up to him. The department store went into liquidation last year and all stores were closed down. So I like to think this is some sort of juicy karma, albeit 7 years later. Story 51. Working in an unpaid co-op position during high school, I was placed in a computer shop with interest in PC repair. During the placement, I learned many useful computer skills like striping paint, caulking windows, and stealing customers' credentials to their internet accounts. Story 52. To come into work for my next shift while I was still on my shift. Worked as a graveyard custodian and manager flubbed the schedule. I was supposed to be off at 6 a.m., and they had me scheduled for 3 a.m. that day. I talked to one of the 3 managers. They couldn't fix it, and the scheduling manager was on vacation. I was told to just stay at work. Talked to the morning manager before leaving about it, and they said they'd look into it. I left anyway, and next day called in sick due to throwing up. I was given all kind of flack by the general manager when I got back in for causing a panic among the managers due to the scheduling error. And that calling in sick was just me abusing the confusion to get out of work. I was sick and you messed up the schedule. Don't blame me for your mess. I quit that job due to the micromanaging and subhuman treatment I received. Custodial staff was treated as below the rest of staff. Story 53. I worked it for a residential school that handled troubled teens. One weekend we were set for a major snowstorm, so the boss told me to shut down all the servers for the weekend so that they didn't just lose power and die. Well, oops, what's that? Then, on Sunday, after the snow hit, he insisted that I get them powered up immediately, as he had to send an important email Monday morning. I drove 2 hours on unplowed roads only to find that the entrance to the building was literally inaccessible. There were snowdrifts 4 feet high all the way up the stairs. Called the boss, told him. He said to wait. He called the residential director who had the students shovel me out a path. Walked in, pushed the power button on all the servers, and walked out without even seeing if they booted. Then, once things started going tits up, he wanted me to do maintenance on the servers after there was no longer any money to pay me. I explained that I couldn't be working for him when I needed to be looking for work. Story 54. My boss asked me to be the guarantor for his son's loan. A man I had never met, but who I knew was arrested with tedious regularity for being pissed in public. Duck that noise. No right asking at all. Fortunately, I had the good sense to say no to that silly crap. Story 55. I worked at a private tutoring company. We demonstrated progress by administering a battery of standardized pretests. And then when the kids completed their several weeks of tutoring, we administered the same tests as a post-test. Well, a new center director came on and she insisted that on the post-test, we re-administer the questions the kids got wrong until they got them right. This meant we might ask them the same question several times in a row until we got the answer we wanted. I privately confronted the director and told her I thought this was very unethical. She responded that everybody at the company did this, and they were all very ethical people. At this point, I'd like to say I made a well-reasoned argument about why this practice was deceitful to our paying clients, but instead, I burst into tears. She told me I could continue to do it her way, or I would be removed from being a tester. I chose to be removed from the position, and I quit as soon as I found another job. Story 56. I used to work at a candy store. Do not duck and eat anything that comes out of those open bins that you can scoop out of. We were told to ignore the amount of bugs that were found inside those things unless a customer complained, or you could literally see them swarming in the containers. Story 57. Used to work at a service department where we often lent cars out to customers. Sometimes the guys on the front desk were slack and forgot to get the customer to fill in the loan vehicle paperwork. We received a speeding fine for a vehicle and couldn't locate the paperwork to link it to a customer. Manager at the time asked if I could take responsibility for the fine. He would cover the cost, but I would have to wear the demerit points for it. Told him no for obvious reasons. Story 58. Reached use it or lose it status when it comes to time off. Took 2 days off before Thanksgiving. Had one of those days canceled the night before because I had to go pick up my boss's turkey from this butcher 4 hours away. The next was spent getting calls about random crap about every hour. Still there. Story 59. Years ago in high school, I worked in a chain supermarket. I ended up having to work every Friday night alongside the store manager as a stocker. The one thing that I was told when I started was to never touch the displays at the end of each aisle. These displays are kept and maintained by vendors. Only the managers are to touch these outside of the vendor. My store manager always had me organizing these on Friday night. I didn't mind doing it until I was told by the grocery manager that doing so could jeopardize the contract with the vendor should something happen, and I'd have to take the blame and probably be fired in the process. Story 60. Postpone surgery, cancel a vacation, peddle high-interest credit cards, change the date of my wedding, take a semester off while I was in college, work the same day my grandmother died, just a few that come to mind. Story 61. I was, a keyword was, the business development manager for a call center at an automotive dealership. For about 8 months, I would send month-end reports to my service director and service manager. One day, I get called into the general manager's office, and both the director and manager are sitting in there. The GM asks me why my reports are missing some certain numbers and figures. I respond with, I have been sending the same report for 8 months, and no one has once mentioned that said numbers need to be in this report. He gave me 15 minutes and to get 8 months worth of numbers. When I said it was impossible, he asked me to step down from the position. Apparently, the department isn't doing so well, so they are pulling at strings to make themselves look good. It happens. Story 62. Asking me to close a deal with a series of people who didn't understand what they were committing to, and hosing them for tens of thousands of dollars and putting them deeply in debt. Probably the worst thing.